Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1. We continue the saga. Chapter 161, the bottom of page Shin Chav 320, bottom of 320. In the last fundamental chapter, 160, Kuf Samach, began Bir Inyan, began to explain in order to understand the Chiddush, the innovation, the contribution of Matan Torah that brought a new energy into existence, Amshachas Atzmos down below, Atzilus into Biyah. So in chapter 160, he returns to the topic of the 10 spheres of Atzilus, which was addressed many chapters ago. And that is the intermediary, the interface between Eir Ein Sof, HaMaitzel, between the source and the worlds, the creations. And the question on the table was, he asked, Momutza, an interface has to have some commonality. Gvul and Bligvul, infinite and finite, have no commonality. The biggest Gvul is not closer to Bligvul than the smallest one. So it's not like you travel up the Gvul and you come to a point where the highest levels of the finite touch the lowest levels of the infinite. So where's the commonality? Teacher and student, even if they're distant, so there's a commonality, and then you find a way to bridge it. Where's the bridge here? So to answer that, he goes back to the summing up the discussions from the early chapters of Ayin Beis, that there are two tracks, two flows of energy coming from Ein Sof. Eir Ein Sof. One is a pchin of Ein Sof Mamish. So Eir Ein Sof is this all-encompassing field of energy. One is an infinite flow, and the other one is a defined flow. And they both come from Eir Ein Sof. So one is Ratzon Elyon, the desire which encompasses everything, and the other is a permeating, integrating, immanent energy, which is tailored and fits into the containers of Atzilus ultimately. The root of these two is before the Tzimtzum, and the root of the Eir HaGvul is in the Kav, the root of the Kav before the Tzimtzum, the 10 hidden spheres. Where they're all an amorphous, unified state. Okay. Explain this distinction is the difference between the first 2,000 years of Taihu, second 2,000 years of Torah. That the first reflects where God was infinitely tolerant. Rav Chesed, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed, abundance of kindness, tolerated even the negative. And he explained in the parentheses what the purpose of that is. Purpose of Taihu, in order there should be the shattering, in order to separate the waste, to be able to elevate it. And the second comes Torah. The second Torah is then there's no discretion. The flow goes equally because it's a type of infinite flow from the Chitzeni, is the outer dimension of Makir. Then comes Torah. Torah comes from Chachma. Chachma has discretion, and there's a flow that fits in everything place. Chachma already has a little din, and that's the Torah. Torah is primarily Chesed, but it has a Gvura. The Gvura also is fundamentally Chesed. This is the Kav. Now, just like the Avodas HaKodesh says that Ein Sof, the Shleimus, the perfection, the completion of Elikus, of God, of Ein Sof, is that just like it has a Koyach HaBilti B'Gvul, a power of the infinite has a power of the finite. Same thing is with the Eir, that there's also a finite energy. And then the Rebbe Rashab explains this with additional elements. So far we've established that there's two energies coming from the divine. The Yuvam B'Yesed, according to what he will understand it even more so, according to chapter 16, where he says that the energy of the Gvul, not the containers, not the power of the finite, is connected to and always attached, like Oyer, a reflection of the source. Min Konaf, that it's like the tzitzis that are pnimi, but that they are from the same fabric, the same material, same substance, same paradigm as the makif, as the talis, as the Eir Bligvul. So you have two things here, to a paradox. On one hand, it's now already a finite manifestation, but on the other hand, it's of the same fabric as the infinite. Why? Because it's a shir atzmi b'kriyach. Because that's how he envisioned and allocated and estimated within himself the infinite possibilities, this one track called the 10 spheres. And then he adds a third point. So 3 points so far. Number one is that there is an Eir Gvul all the way that's connected to the Ein Sof. Number two is that this is different than the Kalim and the containers in the fact that it's attached like the tzitzis, min kanaf, part of the same fabric. And number three, he goes on what he said earlier, that there's two types of tzimtzumim. The tzimtzum of the siluk of the bligvul has to completely disappear, completely be withdrawn. The tzimtzum in the 10 hidden spheres is more of a diminished. And when the bligvul was removed and withdrawn, a rishimu, an impression remained of it in the gvul, in the Eir HaGvul. And this explains the paradox of the kav. That on one hand it creates distinction, on the other hand it creates interconnectivity, hiskalus. How's that possible? So according to the opinion that the kav is bligvul and that it's rooted in the bligvul and is not Eir HaGvul, you could say very simple. That's why it has that. It has on its own, it's interconnected. The tzimtzum imposes on it something that's not natural to the kav itself and causes a finite flow. But according to what is explained here, how does that work? The answer is because there's a reshim. Something remains from the bligvul in the gvul, and therefore it has the power to also connect. So that answers the question of the mamutza. So we're no longer dealing with two completely separate entities, a finite existence and an infinite flow of energy. The finite is rooted in the finite power of the finite energy of the divine. And being that it's divine energy, so it's not like a completely foreign entity, it's also divine. And it has both elements. It has on one side a common denominator with the divine, that it's Eir and Davuk and Ein HaMoir, similar to that. And on the other hand, it has the side to it that it is, and I remember Shir Batzmi, that he estimated it within himself. And it has also that impression from the Ein Sof. On the other hand, it has a similarity and a commonality to Ak, because it's already a finite energy that's allocated toward the creation, toward the structure of existence. In chapter 161, however, the levels that are before Atzilus, this is Atzilus. Atzilus is the interface, because Atzilus, there's the manifestation of these two elements. Because you could ask that question, if this is the case, then the Mamutza is not Atzilus, the Mamutza is the Eir HaGvul, or the Kav. So that's what he's qualifying now. That remember, before Atzilus, you don't really have, you're going to see in a moment, you don't really have the structure yet defined. So the level before it says everything is covered and concealed. It's in a state of like an unconscious state. And everything is simple and plain, meaning there's no shapeless. In a state of non-substance, non-existent state. In other words, it's all still in an amorphous type of nebulous potential state. Omnam kasher bo ba'atzilus harizeh shebo begili da'atzilus hafrosha sa'ora me'en Ein Sof. However, as it comes into Atzilus, that means that it comes in a revelated state in Atzilus, and Atzilus is hafrosha sa'ora me'en Ein Sof. It is an emanation. Hafrosha literally means a separation, like when you mafresh challah. You take the dough and you separate from it. So Atzilus is already a distinct entity separate from the source. It's one with it, but it's something you can recognize. So think of it this way. When the seed is still in the state of potential, then yes, you've begun the process of manifesting, but it's only when it actually becomes a child or a tree or an entity that you can really say that's where the real interface begins to function. Ub'chinas Metzius Eir. In Atzilus, it also is. It's in a state of a substantial Eir, energy. Eir HaChochmeh, ve'Eir HaBina, Eir HaChesed. That there's the energy of Chochmeh, there's the energy of Bina, there's the energy of Chesed. Distinct. Not all encompassed in some, they said, in the source itself. And nevertheless, Atzilus is essentially a state of energy, meaning a reflection of its source. So yes, it's true, when we talk Lifnei Tzimtzum, you talk about Eir HaGvul, but Eir HaGvul there, remember, is only language. We're only talking about it because we know from that it comes outside of it. Think of like the sun. Since light comes out of the sun, we must know there's light inside the sun. But we can't really relate to the light inside the sun. First of all, it's too hot there, too bright. Secondly, we don't know its state. It's all inside this. It's all inside the source. When you see a tree, you know there was then you understand that in the seed it was encompassed the whole power of the tree. But before the tzimtzum, you have to see it not even in a seed state, because not even a seed there. There it's completely in the artist's mind. There's no mind either. But you understand, it's all being envisioned. It's a whole different thing when you actually, something begins to emerge and have an identity. The Eir B'chinas Dveikus B'mkeirei. So Atzilus is, so yes, now it's emerged, but it's not emerged like we've spoken. Remember we said with the tzitzis, the same thing. It's not emerged in a way that it's completely severed. It's severed from its source. So here, look at it like this. Here's the source. Think of it this way. Everything is encompassed inside the source. Then it emerges from the source. Just I'm talking physically. So you could have it emerges, but it remains, but it's detached, and you can't recognize. Or you could say it emerges, but it's completely still davuk. It's aware of its source. So it's still there, two things, but completely aware. As it will go down to Biyah, as we've learned, that awareness is going to diminish until a point of no awareness at all, like in our existence. So Atzilus is completely aware. So here's the source, Atzilus, and then as it diminishes, we become slowly this independent entity that can become defy or even ignore or deny the source.
It's aware but not attached. Atzilus to its source. It's aware. But before
attached as in the davuk.
Now it seems like it is.
No, I don't know what you mean by attached. Davuk. Oyer is always connected. Oyer inside the sun.
It's always connected.
Atzilus is not the Oyer inside the sun. It's the Oyer outside of the sun. Think of it that way. So, but it's not yesh. See, it's not. It's Or. But it's not in the sun itself. In the sun would be the example before the tzimtzum. It's like when you're teaching someone. It's how within yourself you're preparing to present, and then there's the presentation. But the presentation is outside of you, but it's completely a reflection of you. And then there's biyah. Biyah already begins to cut off some type of sense of yesh, sense of independence, sense of separateness.
The presentation is Atzilus.
This Atzilus that's saying or Chachma or Bina or Chesed, it's not in the context of Sar and Kalim, right? It's not like
it doesn't mention Kalim here because it is Ur and Kalim ultimately, but its core power, because Atzilus is connected, is Ur. Ur in general is a sign of awareness of a source. Keli can be connected to the source and is one, but a Keli doesn't have awareness on its own. A Keli, as I said yesterday, is just an instrument. It's Chesed. Ur is Gili. Ur is a revelation. Anyway, he's not mentioning Kelim here. Right now, talking to Urus, right? V'sharshei, was a long parenthesis? No, not long. Okay, so it's connected. So Dveikus B'mkeirei. V'sharshei hu me'eses spheres hagnuz. This he adds in the parentheses, and the root of it, the root of these 10 spheres in Atzilus and these 10 Urus is the 10 hidden spheres in their emanator. Shem b'chinas pshitus v'achdus. They are in a state of pshitus. They're like in the sun. Pshitus means they don't have a tangible presentation, as I just said. They're inside the source. So they're pshitus. Pshitus means substanceless, shapeless, plain, simple. V'achdus, and unified. Remember, we learned there's 3 stages. Okay? There's in the sun, let's call it that way, in the source where they're complete pshitas. Then there's the kav that emerges, but it's still not in containers in Atzilus. And then there's how it comes into Atzilus. We learned the three stages. So he's saying now, and Gamba Kav, which is ready after the Tzimtzum, the Kav, Heim Bechinas Esses Spheres B'lima. There are 10 spheres without substance. And similarly, the 10 spheres of Atzilus are in a state of Pshittis also. Like it's known from what it says in Eitz Chaim. That the containers do not become energies until only when it goes from Atzilus to Biyah, meaning that in a kiln, that's what I'm saying.
So they're still without
Yeah. What does he mean here? But what is enakel and nasim eres? Only of a leila ma'al matzilas. Should have said avalei ba'atzilas.
No, not from the Malaba Atzilus to Atzilus. Like Atzilus to Biyah.
Okay, something like that. Yeah. So for Eitz Chaim, it's clear she'enakel nasim eres. I'm not sure what it means, to be honest. She'ena kel nasim eres el matzilas b'zav v'leil mayim matzilas.
I think it means Kevin and Tzilus to get down to make the
Shomer
almost beyond, but what it means.
Maybe.
Just repeat, please, from the parentheses.
Oh, hold on. It says that the Kalim, the Shleishim Kalim of Naran, of Atzilus, becomes the Eris of the, I'm sorry, the 30 Kalim of Atzilus, of Malchus Atzilus, become the Eris of Nefesh Ruach Neshama of Biyah. That may be what he's referring to. Probably. So in other words, the Kalim become the Eris in Biyah, but higher than that, they're still in a state of air, basically.
And no substance.
Which means that when do they really begin to manifest as air in a tangible ways in Biyah? In other words, Atzilus, even the air is still in an amorphous state, relatively speaking. That's why they're still shapeless. It's just a flow. He's talking about like this. The point to explain is that Atzilus is where the interface manifests. The beginning of the chapter was to say, because higher than Atzilus, even though there's already an Er HaGvul, there's a finite energy before the Tzimtzum, and there's a Kav after the Tzimtzum, but the true place where it plays itself out is in Atzilus. Because Atzilus is already some type of substance. In the root, the 10 hidden spheres are completely shapeless, like in the sun. In the Kav, they're also blima, without substance. Then he's adding that even Atzilus, relative to Biyah, is also in a state of substanceless. But it's compared to the 10 hidden spheres in the Kav, it's already beginning to emerge. It's basically different levels in the subtlety of the level of the spheres. That's what he's saying here. So, there are Kalim in Atzilus, but they're so close to the energy. Let's put it this way. We spoke the energy inside the sun. Think of the Kav as the first light right out of the sun. So it's out of the sun, but it's not yet a presentation. It's still under the influence, under the shadow of the air before. Then the kav diminishes. As it diminishes, it becomes what we call the presentation to a student. Presentation now is completely attached and connected to the source. It can't be distorted. Because if the teacher is presenting, this presentation, you could say, when it's coming right out of the teacher's mouth, is still in a state that's very much still the teacher.
It's still hard for the students still.
Right. So there, you say the kalim are there, because you could hear it, but it's very much, let's call it, completely under the control of the teacher. In Biyah, what's going to happen is the presentation now will be diluted even further, and now you begin to see much more substance, and that's why someone can make a mistake, and it's not as connected. He's just adding, look, it all comes down to, as I say in Avodah, to refine ourselves to understand states of more and more subtlety of any particular area. That's what's going on here. Because what we see here is that truth is infinite levels. It's not just 3 levels. In general terms, it's 3. The 10 hidden spheres, the Kav, and the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and then, of course, the levels after that. But this goes on and on, because every person we speak to, everything we do, well, what state of subtlety? So you have to remember that there are levels. There are levels of subtlety to the point where it's completely encompassed in the source, like he said, the Kav and Atzilus. The parentheses is simply qualifying to say in the source it's Pshittis, and even Atzilus relative to Biyah. But Vimkain, let's continue.
Like a rudimentary presentation, Atzilus, instead of,
Yeah, that's a way to put it. I don't know, rudimentary. I think it's more important that it's not rudimentary, that it's very pure. That it's very pure and still, and it's like the newborn child. It's perfect, but it's a child. It's independent. It's outside of the mother's womb. It's pristine. It's in very pristine form. The iris. So there's a certain transparency going on there that will change as it goes. I mean, it's fascinating because it's really an evolution from the coarsest to the most refined. That's what's going on here, all the way to the source. Remember, we're creating a interface. We're creating a pipeline. So we need to have these stepping stones, and every stone covers another particular. So the truth is, this we could sit here for days or weeks or years, a lifetime, just discussing the different levels between Bria, Atzilus, higher than Atzilus. So that ultimately you want to find it within yourself, because then you can relate to it. If not, it becomes too mathematical. It becomes, okay, the 10 hidden spheres are like in the sun. The outside of the sun is this. So it becomes almost like a mathematical formula. That's where they all belong. The question is, how does it apply to us? That's why I'm using the example of a child or of a teacher. It applies to us because we're climbing this ladder, one way or other. Obviously, we're beginning far lower than all of this, because this is a state of full awareness. It's like the Ovis. Did they exist? Of course they existed. But they were completely 24/7 aligned. That's Atzilus. You have an Avram, you have a Yitzchak. In the 10 hidden spheres, you don't have Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. There are 3 energies that are all encompassed in one big, nebula, like that type of thing. I think with modern science, it's extremely easy to explain this, because you see it all the time. Even in basic science, where they talk about a star exploding, or an explosion that releases particles, and they become things. Like we see all the time, anything. So it's fascinating, because we understand today that things exist in a certain type of nebulous form. Then some reaction, heat or speed or whatever it is, or time, causes some type of unrest. In this case, would be like the Tzimtzum. And as a result, you start having all kinds of stuff happening. So in the early stages, it's still all part of this process. You look at the development of a child, of a fetus. Just see the development. You see how it literally is one with the mother. A cell breaks off, another cell splits, and it begins this process. Suddenly you see a head and a heart. Then you see organs, So we see this process throughout our lives many ways. The thing is, we live on a superficial outer level, so it needs a little thought. But everyone's fascinated by this process. Look how the fascination of the images that we see today of the development of a fetus from conception. It's unbelievable, like a miracle. This, and then suddenly, here we are. And then this person can become a criminal one day. That was a little cell attached to its mother, completely vulnerable and dependent. It's unbelievable. And become substance abusers, and coffee and tea and all that.
Fine.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, I was never a mother, but I just think about a mother seeing her son, let's say, or child, wander somewhere. And this is once part of me. This is like me. A piece of my body is now on its own.
This is very slow. When you do it mathematically, but you have to keep in mind there's these auras, there are new dimensions, and that's what science is first looking at, that there's new dimensions in particle physics, because things disappear. You go to another realm completely. Even when you think of, when normally we think of a child, we think of something linearly growing. Even as amazing it is, it's not a aura. That's the whole key here to me. There's auras, and that's the depth of it. Each level is an aura of the next one. I mean, it's like a whole.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. V'im kein harigam eses sfiras atzilus zeh masha erin sof shir ba'atzmei. So according to this, also the 10 spheres of Atzilus is also what Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum shir ba'atzmei, estimated within himself. V'gam yesh b'zeh reishim Ein Sof. He's basically bringing out here that not only is the air Agvul before the Tzimtzum have is part of God envisioning and allocating or estimating, and it has an impression, but also Atzilus has these two things. It's also has the Shir Atzmei, also envisioned it, and it has a reishim of Ein Sof, and has an impression from the Ein Sof. So we find from this that yesh behem beis inyanim, that in them, in the 10 spheres of Atzilus, there are two things. Havahainu, what that means is sheyesh behem b'chinas Ein Sof hamaitzel. These energies have within them from the infinite light of the emanator. That's what the infinite divine light estimated within himself to radiate in form of gvul, a finite way. In other words, to radiate in a way that he would be a chakim, a wise one, umeivin, an understanding one, v'chazdan, and a kind one. God is above these faculties, but He has chosen, envisioned to be that. For whom min kanaf mamish, and it's min kanaf mamish. It's exactly of the same substance, the same fabric as the garment itself. The mishum zeh atzilus ub'chinas dimyan ve'erech le'erin sof ha'maitzel. This is the first thing in Atzilus. And because of this, Atzilus is Dimyan, has a similarity, the Erech, and a proportionate relationship, the Ein Sof HaMaitzel, to the infinite light of the emanator, of the emanator. V'zeu she'Atzilus nikra Adam, and this is the meaning that Atzilus is called Adam. Atzilus is called Adam. What does Adam come from? Loshen Adama le'Elyon. B'chinas Ein Sof HaMaitzel. Adama le'Elyon. Adam. Sometimes we refer from Adama, which is dust of the earth. But Adama also has from the word Dimyan. Adama as in similar to. So it's Adama le'Elyon. Adama, similar to above. Like we say, human beings created B'Tselem Elikim. Atzilus is Adama le'Elyon. To what? What means above? To Ein Sof HaMaitzel, the infinite light of the emanator. Now comes the second half of Atzilus, the second side of Atzilus. Omnam, however, Mashem b'chinas gvul v'tachlis.
But we said the gvul first.
Said
shir ba'atzmai.
No, but that's he's talking there as part of the sheyesh behem b'chinas Ein Sof hamaitzel. There he wants to focus that it has the Ein Sof, the higher thing. Yeah. Now he says Omnam. However, Mashem b'chinas gvul v'tachlis, but the 10 spheres are in a form of gvul, of a finite, with tachlis, with essentially parameters and purpose. Even though this is essentially the power of Ein Sof, this is the power of the divine to radiate in a form of parameters and measure and boundaries. Nevertheless, because the bottom line, it's a reflection that's in a state of gvul v'tachlis, limits and parameters. Hine hagam shagvul v'tachlis, that's the Swiss, ene be'erech hagvul v'tachlis de biyah. So even though this finite and so-called confined tachlis here doesn't mean purpose necessarily. Tachlis means like en tichla. This has no end, has an ending. Gvul v'tachlis means that it has some type of conclusion, some type of finish, right? Some type of right, yeah. Of the essence is not commensurate to the gvul tachlis of biyah, to the finite nature and so-called conclusion of finishing of the biyah, the ending of biyah. The gam legabe b'chinas hayesha achrena shebetzilus ein arech gufo legabe yamei ukainus. That's even according to biyah. Even what did I say? Enech ketipa. What did I say? Oh, you're right. Henech Ketib. I know it's again the Hebrew, my glasses. And so Atzilus, see, it's all a qualification that even though it's coming from the Keich Hagul of Ein Sof, and even though it's infinitely distant, it's not commensurate to the way it's in Biyah. And not only that, it's not even commensurate to the way it's on the lowest levels of Atzilus in Arech. It's also not commensurate to there. Ketipa, like a drop compared to the great ocean. An ocean. So what's one drop compared to an ocean? So the end of Atzilus is like a drop, and Atzilus is like an ocean. So even the Gvul of Atzilus, B'kol Mokim, Kivin Shenikra Gvul V'Tachlis L'Gabe Ein Sof. Since it's called Gvul V'Tachlis, at the end of the day, it is ultimately some finite envisioning going on. L'Gabe Ein Sof compared to Ein Sof, the unending. Harim Mitzad Zeh Hein Mizdamen L'B'chinas Biyah. That's where he's going out to the second half. Because of this, due to this, they have a similarity to the levels of Biyah. So he's basically saying that though we added the Chiddush was, how could the Mamutza be between two things that have no commonality? So the answer does have commonality, because Eir HaGvul is an extension of, and it comes out of the Eir HaBli Gvul. It's also, and that's why there's a similarity, because it's part of the divine power to create the Eir HaGvul. And not only that, like we said, it also is from the same fabric, and it has a reshim, has an impression from the Eir HaBli. But then comes the question the other way around. Okay, if it's really an extension of that, so then it doesn't have any commonality with us, with existence.
That was from the top down, now we got to go from the bottom.
Yeah. So he's saying no, but since this is a Gvul and Tachlis, and even though it's far more abstract and subtle than any Gvul that we relate to in Biyah, and even in the lowest levels of Tzilus, like a drop in an ocean, but it is a drop. I'm sorry, it is an ocean, and the drop already have a commonality. This is a drop from that ocean.
So it's a bigger.
It's not like, let's say, a drop from an ocean is true, is very, very distant, but it's not like a drop compared to something that's not even the ocean, something that is beyond an ocean altogether. So we have now a level that and that's the key. So we have now, in a sense, you can almost say we have a Bli Gvul in the world of Gvul.
Right.
But it's not the Bli Gvul of the world, but in other words, the Bli Gvul of Eir HaBli Gvul, which because what do you resolve? The question is, what have we resolved here? You just transferred the Mamutzi. You could just straight transfer it from the Eir HaBli Gvul now to the Eir HaGvul. Now you're saying is also fundamentally. So he says no. The Eir HaGvul is a true Gvul. It's true Gvul. It already has something that's similarity to ocean. So let's think of it this way. You said the
lower part of the Tzilus and the upper. Then you have to have an interface between the lower and the upper within that Tzilus.
Fine, but right now, But he's skipping that right now. That's just going to help. The answer is, we have the answer. The answer is that God, in His infinite power, has the power to create a finite energy. The finite energy is part of God's finite, but because it has a finite energy, it's not infinite energy. There, it finally starts having a similarity. That's the key. However, the similarity is, from the perspective from above, is just simply God's power. But there is a similarity. That's the point. If you take away the Eir HaGvul, you have a jump that you cannot bridge. You have a schism you can't bridge. Eir HaBli Gvul cannot relate to a structured existence. Once there's an Eir HaGvul, on divine terms, you start having the commonality. I mentioned yesterday that when the tzaddik applies himself, the Rebbe applies himself, he has that also commonality. He could have a commonality. I would say one thing to give it a little example of the levels he's talking here. It's a classic example. You hear it when the Chassidim used to explain these ideas. When you say, for example, that the infinite numbers is infinitely distant from the finite set of numbers, right? As we learned before. So number one, and the trillion, zillion, whatever, is as close to Bli Gvul, to infinite, than nothing's closer. None of them are closer to the infinite. They're all equally distant. So that's a very big gap, because there's no way you can jump from here to there. However, what do you have to say? You have to say, if you ask infinity, what do you think about these numbers? Infinity say, they're all equal to me. They're all the same. But if you ask infinity, do you think they don't exist? You can't say they don't exist. Why can't they don't exist? Because they're numbers. Infinity is a number, and this is a number. It's a set of numbers. Different set. But it is infinite, ultimate infinite set of numbers, a set of numbers. So what infinity can say is that the numbers don't have infinity. But it cannot, in other words, it could say what it's lacking, it's missing. But what it is, it is. Infinity can't say number one doesn't exist. It just says number one and a trillion are equal to me. Because of infinity. But it can't say they don't exist. They're all numbers. They have a common thing that they're called number. That is another level. A level outside of the world of numbers. Let's say we're talking about, I don't know, kangaroos. I just picked that as an example. Or something that doesn't even respect numbers. An infinity that does not even know what a number is. That infinity will say that what's lacking in the finite numbers and in the infinite is not only what they don't have. The finite numbers, you're only one and not infinity. But what you are, one is one. From this perspective of infinity, it says even what they are has no value. The whole thing is meaningless to me. I'm not in the world of numbers altogether. Infinite numbers, finite numbers. So the finite therefore completely loses any value. Even what it is, it doesn't have any value. Not only what it's not. You understand what I'm saying?
But the infinite numbers still have value because it's infinite?
No, they also don't have value.
Okay.
Because it's outside of the world of numbers. My point that I'm trying to make here is that if you're talking from the perspective of Eir HaBli Gvul Mamish, the whole thing doesn't matter. Not only it's not that it's just that Bli Gvul is completely beyond. The Bli Gvul of Eir HaGvul is part of the divine, but it cannot say that I don't recognize Chesed. Eir HaBli Gvul says I don't recognize Chesed, Chachma. Not only that I don't recognize that you're limited, because you're not infinite Chachma, let's say, whatever, or you're not more than what you are. I don't recognize you. There's no such thing. The level of Sfiras Ein Ketz, the word Chachma Chesed means nothing.
Right.
It's like in the infinite world of it's an infinity that doesn't even recognize the value of something that's finite. In the finite energy, Eir HaGvul, yes, it is fundamentally also infinite, because it's coming from a place called God's divine infinite power, but it cannot say I don't recognize Chachma because it's personality. What makes an Eir HaGvul that God wanted now to envision that he's a Chacham, that he's a Maven, that he's a Chazdan. So it could say, you know what? Your level of Chachma is equal to me, to the highest Chacham, to the lowest Chacham, but it cannot say Chachma doesn't exist. So therefore, you've already established it's still Bli Gvul in a way, but has created a commonality with the Gvul. And when you diminish it enough, it has a connection. There's a place to go, so to speak. In other words, there's a place to go where Chachma, even Chachma in our existence, which is finite and limited and all the flaws, has somewhere to go in the divine entity. It goes to the Eir HaGvul, which, yes, is from God, originates as part of God's same fabric as the Eir HaBli Gvul.
So that's what he keeps bringing out.
But it is no longer, because this is the key. Even in Eir Ein Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum, you have to say if God envisioned Eir HaGvul, you have to say that what did he envision that's different than the Eir HaBli Gvul, that without the envisioning. You have to say something of this nature. I'm just trying to give it palatable terms where it retains the fact that it's coming from that place, like he said, but the bottom line is, because it's called Gul of Tachlis, the Kaaba Ein Sof, you have to say that it has some similarity to the identities that will later emerge in Biyah. My example helped? I hope.
What's the bigger chiddush? That Atzilus is connected with this world, or that
understand infinite less. Now we understand the word infinity even less now.
A bigger chiddush?
Infinity.
Chiddush that there's a combination of both.
Of something, and it has to relate to numbers, so it's confusing a little more.
I know, but you have to think of infinity sometimes qualitatively, of completely different.
It's hard to, because we're so used to saying an infinite amount of something, and that's locked. At least I am locked into it.
So now he concludes. And that's why Atzilus is called interface between the Maitzelein of the emanator, infinite emanator Baruch Hu, plus Bihi l'Nivraim, to the creatures. What? Yeah. Okay. Now next subject.
Like 12 lines.
12.
That's just
Now he's continuing. Or by Esesviz, that's Silas Gufa. So we understand the Mamutza. Yeah. I go back to the mashal that I gave from the example I gave from the Mittler Rebbe. Mittler Rebbe said he has to find it within himself before he can give him a tikkun. We say similar by the Arizal. Students ask, why the Arizal say Al-Chet? Arizal was that tzaddik gomer. He had those sins. So one of the answers is because the neshama klolis is connected to all the idn, so he has within himself what everyone else has. So he's saying it for Klal Yisrael, so to speak. Which means you have to say subtly something's there. What do we benefit from this? As I said yesterday, you can have a tzaddik, but then he's completely removed. He can give us advice and blessings, but there's nothing in him that's common to us. It doesn't get a mortal, simple man or woman like us. The fact that the Mittler Rebbe said he has to stop the Yechidus and find it within him means that there's as I said, a deeper connection and application. It's like the Eir HaBligvul has to now apply itself to come to an Eir HaGvul to identify. The Mittler Rebbe on his own doesn't need to identify with anyone. He has his own Aveda, he serves God, and that's it. But he's a Rebbe. And as a Rebbe, he's serving his flock. And when they come to him, it's not just he's bestowing upon them his gifts and blessings. They are him, and he's them. That's a whole different level of relationship. So if he would just say, listen, you come to me, I'm on the mountain, I'll give you my blessings. That's like Eir HaBligvul. Okay, Eir HaBligvul, but Mamshech blessings. But that the Eir HaBligvul, which is so infinitely distant from anyone, should apply itself to find in me something common to you. And it's true. It's not some fabricated thing, God forbid. He's actually finding subtly what's you inside of himself. That is essentially what we're talking about here. That's already the Eir HaBligvul has now become an Eir HaGvul. He's not become you. Remember, the Rebbe didn't become you, but he became something that can identify with you, and you can identify with him. And that makes the connection. That's essentially the Eir HaGvul as a manifest in Atzilus. So though even that part of him is far higher than it is in us, but now there's something to hold on to. There's a type of bridge. Like I said, like a parent bends down to a child. There's a bridge. Even though you could say I'm superior, I'm beyond, the child doesn't understand me, I'll relate with my child when they grow older and we can learn together. No. In that simple act of connecting, there's that power. So that's what I was saying. There's a bligvul that completely it's unrelated, it's indifferent. Then there's a place where the Bli Gvul envisions or estimates the Gvul, manifests Atzilus. So yes, from the perspective of the teacher, it's still Bli Gvul, still part of his own possibility, but he's now created a bridge. There's we call it a handle, something to hold on to. I think that's a good example too. Think of an infinite bucket, and then you give it a handle. It's also part of Min Kanaf. It's the same fabric, but it's a handle you can hold on to. When we hear that there's Keyecha Eira Chesed, Eira Chochmah in the Esser Sfiras HaGnuzos, that he wants to be a Chakim, even Chazdan, then we can talk about God in this way. That's the beauty here. When we say, when I'm learning Torah, I'm learning God's wisdom. When I'm doing Chesed, just like He is kind, compassionate, so too you should be. What do you mean, God is Chanun? God is beyond that, but He manifested in it. His Eira Bli Gvul has chosen this piece of art called Chesed, called Chachma, called Bina. When we do it, we're emulating. So we cannot say our Chesed, when I do kindness, it's as great as God's kindness. God's tzedakah is far beyond ours. But you also can't say it's completely two different realities. They both have common words called tzedakah. So when we help someone, we in a sense trigger God's helping us. There's a word called help. There's a word called chesed, compassion. And we can elicit these attributes of the divine. Someone will say, God is His attributes? No. But He chose, the Eira Bli Gvul chose to manifest in attributes. So we have a handle. We have something to hold on to. So something has become common. There is some common denominator. That's what creates the mamutza. Take away that God chose to become a chazdan, a kind one, then we don't have that expression, just as you're kind, I'm kind. No, there's no you kind. He's not kind. He's beyond. He doesn't have the attribute of kindness. You could say, God ordered us as a master to a slave, be kind. I want you to be kind. But that doesn't create a relationship between us and God. That doesn't suddenly say, oh, we have a similarity. But we say, V'alachta b'drachav, mizdame leberu. Go in His ways. Emulate God's personality, His midas. That changes the equation. That means that there's something common. Someone will say, you compare your midas to God's midas? Of course not. They're infinitely distant. And God's chesed is completely different than that, but it's chesed. So there's one little handle, something to hold on to. I think hopefully that was helpful. You have to tell me, you're all so silent. Okay.
Always tells to observe.
Absorb. Yeah, no, I mean, are you absorbing this? So now we continue. So by Esser Sfiras Atzilus Gufa Beis Madrege Sheba Mamutza. So this is Esser Sfiras in general. That's their role. That's their interface. Chesed of Atzilus becomes a bridge for our Chesed and Biyah to connect to all the way to the highest place where the envisioning, the estimation of the Shir Atzmei.
Can we ask how the Rishima fits into this?
You could ask, but it's not this Rishima. That's just the record. The Rishima he's talking here, Roshima Ein Sof, is basically very simple. When the Eira Bli Gvul, the infinite possibilities of the artist, envisioned or allocated, or what do we say, estimated, Shir Atzmei, 10 spheres, it's all within the artist. That image that he's now envisioning of 10 spheres still has an impression of the infinite possibilities. That's all this Reshim is about. And this is obviously answering the big question, how the Kav has the element of Bli Gvul in it, the ability to interconnect, because there's some impression left. As I mentioned yesterday, when the artist is creating one piece of art, you look at it. So a simple person can look at it and say, okay, nice art. Someone wise can look at it and say, 1 second, I see the artist's other possibilities. This is not just a simple artist. He's not just a sum of the parts. I could see in this art an impression of so many other art he made. Not only that, but all his infinite possibilities. That's what the Reshim accomplishes. Clear?
It's higher than a Rishima.
1 second. I don't know, higher or lower. It's what it is. I don't speak in higher or lower. You speak in space, I understand. But you mean before. You mean to say that it happens before? Yeah, because this is before the Tzimtzum. Yeah, but this is, when you say it's prior to the Tzimtzum. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. This Rishim. But this is not called Rishima that you hear about when you hear Rishim. Rishim is a different thing completely. Then came a Tzimtzum HaRishon. Concealed everything. It withdrew everything. A black hole. Question is this black hole completely void and empty or not? And this comes and then, so it says, no, it's not void and empty. An impression remains from the energy that was there before. Think of it like, a type of like a cloud, almost like a film, a very, very, very almost invisible something is there. It's called Oasis. Because the Oasis were envisioned before. Except there, they were completely consumed and encompassed in the energy. Now you have essentially this type of a Rishima called Rishima, Oasis HaRishima.
It's a classic Rishima.
It's like, think of it like this. Yeah, you could say that somebody writes letters down with words and ideas, and then they erase it. What happens? There are 4 examples actually used in Chassidus for the Rishima, this Rishima we're talking about now. They erase it. You come to look at it, you can't figure out what it means anymore. You barely can figure out the letters. That's the Rishima. So something remains. So it's just a mashal I'm giving. That something remains, it has everything that was there before. But you can't read it because the air was withdrawn. So you only have like so-called these bare letters. You can't even see the letters, actually. Obviously it's a physical example, so it's not conceptually. This will become the root of the containers, not of the energies. Now the kav flows into this black hole and starts bringing light in. What is it doing? You ever see those things like invisible ink? Think of invisible ink, right? So you write something, it disappears, and then you pour some liquid on it, so it starts emerging, right? So think of it like a film, a black, dark film. You can't see. Thank you. A film. You look at a film, you shine some light through it, a story emerges. Images, story. So the kav brings to life this Rishim. And it has nothing to do with this Rishim, at least that I know of. Completely different. This Rishim is in Eir. The other Rishim is in darkness. So that's the key difference. One is connected to Eir, the other is Kalim. Okay. Uba Esser spheres, that's Tzilas Gufa, now in this interface.
Just that our Rishim, the Ein Sof seems to have the shlemus to the connection to the spheres, to the source, basically.
Yeah, that's a third point that he made in the previous chapter, and also here. It adds that the answer that the Kav adds in the commonality of the Er HaGvul to Ein Sof, because it still has an impression of it. And it gives it the power, it's a practical application. It gives the power to the Kav to create interconnectivity, as I mentioned. If you only had the Er HaGvul, you'd have, let's say, a human body, but you wouldn't have organs talking to each other. Imagine that. So that's the fact that it has a bli gvul creates interconnectivity. That's the key thing.
So the kav is made of or bli gvul, or I thought it was gvul at that point.
And it has a reshim and an impression from the era bli gvul.
That's the other.
That's the other side.
Yeah.
There's 2 sides to it. I could repeat it again, but basically, Er HaBli Gvul, think of Er HaBli Gvul. Infinite possibilities. It envisions and imagines one of those possibilities. Now that's not the caveat, the 10 hidden spheres. One of those possibilities is made of the same fabric as the Er Ein Sof. It's just one of them, 10 spheres. It also happens to have an impression from that Er HaBli Gvul. So in many ways it's still influenced by it. But you can't call it Er HaBli Gvul. It is Er HaGvul. It is Chochmah Chesed. That's the bottom line. That's why, as it manifests lower, Atzilus has that side, and then there's the other side that is Er HaGvul. It is ultimately Er of Chesed, like he said. Listen, it's all recorded. You can listen to it as many times as you like, by the way. I think I've said enough that if you listen to this more than once, you could hear it. Trust me, if I think I didn't say enough, I say it again, because I know it's all recorded, so I could say it for you guys again, but the best is to look. I think I explained. I think a lot of examples I've given will help. Maybe I'm going faster than I should go, but we're moving. I feel comfortable that I've said enough to more or less understand it, at least on a certain level. Now he's going further. In Esses Spheres Atzilas Gufa, if the 10 Esses Spheres in general are interface, in the 10 spheres there's 2 levels. Sheba Mamutza. There's 2 madregas in the Mamutza. Zeh b'chinas Chachmila v'Chachmetata. A higher wisdom and a lower wisdom. Now he's going back to how Chachma plays such an important role. It's known, because now it's known, it's known that the primary revelation of the Kav is in Chachma. In wisdom, the first sphere, the Yud, the first Yud. But Chachma, he b'chinas kayach ma. And Chachma, as we've learned quite a number of times, is a kayach ma. The word's kayach ma. Chachma is kayach ma. But the power of substance, of what? And b'chinas bli mohusa mitzi is davar adayin. When a spark of idea, a flash, is conceived, it's a germ. All it is a dot. It's a speck, spark. It's not a mitzias davar. You can't see it's a personality and substance yet. And this is what we say that Chachma is in the form of a nakuda, a dot, a point. What's a point? A point can't be measured. It's a state of heder mitzias. It's not a state of non-substance, as we've discussed many times. So yes, we see a dot, but that's only for our eyes. What is a dot in mathematics, for example? Is infinite amount of dots in a line. How could that be? Because a dot doesn't occupy space. And therefore the hashra, the what? Not the influence. No, hashra sein so baruch hu. Hashra means when the hashra hashchina, the presence and the resting of the infinite light. Hu b'chachma dafka. Where is Ein Sof rest? Where does it settle? Where does it? It's a chachma specifically. Which means that their rest, their hovers, their shayra, their what would you say the words? You said rests.
Lies.
You should say we translate dwell within.
Dwells. The Ein Sof HaBligvul. Right? Because we're talking the Kav and the Ein Sof has in it what? It has in it the Bligvul in it. So where does this manifest? Primarily in Chachma, the Bligvul. Like it says elsewhere, V'ayim Mashi is bar l'kaman Pedic. What does it say? Shin Nun Ches. And look what we learn later, chapter 358. And that's why Chachma is still in a state of Bligvul. Now again, remember, we're talking relative here. Obviously Chachma is a sphere. He's talking about as a relative Bligvul relative to the lower levels. That's the key here. We're not talking about Er HaBligvul, we're talking about the element of Bligvul that exists within the spheres. Being in Er Mayim Rakia, like it's known in the Indian of Er Mayim Rakia. Er Mayim Rakia is a new subject matter being introduced now. So let me explain what the Er Mayim Rakia is expression in Zayhar, and actually in the Psukim. But the Zohar explains it. It's 3 dimensions. You talk about Er Mayim Rakia, literally means energy, water, and sky. So he says that Er Mayim Rakia, the Chacham B'chinas Mayim, the Naidi. Chachma is the level of water, that Naidi, that moves. Water is constant movement. It's not a solid. It's a liquid. So it moves. U'kamei nekudas ha'askala. So Chachma is the level of Mayim, the Naida, like the nekudas ha'askala, like the point of an idea, the conception of an idea. Sheichem lasbira b'kamei fanim shenim. That you can explain it in many different ways. in several different ways. And also, you can incline it. You can still incline it to every different direction. When you hear a pure concept before it's been developed, it has that element in it that is like water. It's not as solid. It's not a solid conclusion that this is the way to explain it. Very often you hear, let's say, a very smart person just give you a concept in a second, a flash, or yourself, a flash. It can go many ways. It's still in a state of flux. Like, think of it like water that's still not frozen into space, into place. Huh? Because it's so close to the source, what he's trying to say is that it still has blig vuldik, it has many options to go, many ways to be explained.
Infinite possibilities.
It doesn't say infinite, but definitely several. Yeah. I would not say infinite because it's at the end of the day, an idea. So you could explain it in many different ways, and also you can incline it to the chol tzad, to every way, to every direction. Because the way the comprehension comes in, the way the idea comes into the comprehension of Bina, where you're already developing, fleshing out there, Daglidu Maya. That's already a state of heaven or sky. Daglidu Maya. The Mayim has now solidified. Like ice. Glida. What's Glida? Right. But even kach dafke.
That's ice cream. All right. What is it?
Glida is ice cream, but yeah. When they wanted to give us ices, we always used to say Glida. It's frozen ice. Ice cream. Frozen cream.
It's ice.
Yeah.
Not ice cream.
In this particular way. But the point of the conception point of Chachma, you can incline it, you can move it, you can lean it to different directions. Like water. You can direct water, go here, here. Ice is in its place, and that's it. It's not flowing anymore. In a state of flow, flux. The same thing we'll understand with the level of wisdom above. That's not yet in a state of defined, a solidly defined state. Because it's not yet a state of substance. And in it dwells the infinite light, blessed be He. Now he's going into two types of Chachma. The inner dimension of wisdom is generally that it's not at all substance. Klal. Like it says in Siddur, this is the Mittler Rebbe composed the Siddur from the Alter Rebbe's Memorim in the Maimer Halukel B'Kodshay. Psukkah is in there. So what does he say there? That Primis HaChachma, there's no Metzias at all. The Chachma Tata, that's Chachma Law. And the lower level of Chachma, B'chinas Malchus, Zeu Sher Shemokar B'Yash Batzilus. That's the level of Malchus, which is the root and source of B'Yah in Atzilus. In Atzilus, where's B'Yah rooted? In Malchus. That's Chachma Tata. Malchus B'chinas Yashem Metzias. And Malchus is in a state of identity and substance.
So he's showing us in Atzilus.
He didn't finish yet. He's showing us in the sphere itself the difference between Chachma La and Chachma Tata. Basically, Chachma is the first sphere, Malchus is the last. Malchus is called Chachma Tata. He's going to explain Chachma Tata because there's a wisdom in Malchus, but Malchus is just element of Yesh. And Chachma and Atzilus is the higher Chachma is an element of Ayin. Blima, Chachma, Kayachma. He's going to explain. It says elsewhere, the Chol Inyan Hamalucha, that the entire of kingship and leadership of Snasus V'Yeshes. It's a state of Snasus, being above and Yeshes, sense of self. I'm the king. B'zeh the David haya bar Nafla, and that's the meaning that David was bar Nafla. He was going to be miscarried. Had it not been for a blessing or a miracle, he was bar Nafla. He was a person who was, his pregnancy would not have come to fruition. Or bar Nafla could be that he had been born and died young. I think no, it could be either way. Bar Nafla means that he was essentially stillbirth. But bar Nafla is a miscarriage. Someone that Nafla means from fallen. From a fallen. It's called a nafla.
A miscarried child is called a nafla.
Yeah. Also, I think a stillborn child may also be called that. I'm not sure already. Now, a child that dies early on is a different name, but the bar nafla, no, it's 30 days. You don't make a pidyon haben for that reason. 30 days, it's considered bar nafla, I think also. So it could be, I don't know if miscarried or means that he didn't have Deloi Havalei Chayin. He didn't have life
After 30 days
of his own. Why was that the case? Why was David a bar nafla? Why didn't he have any life and had to be given life? You know, this is the famous thing that David needed 70 years. That was he got from.
It says it over here in the Pnim, the next one.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. Malchus, and Malchus, David is Melech, David HaMelech. Being that it's a Yesh Metzias, it's not a Keli. Interesting. So David,
It's almost saying the opposite. Bar Nafli had nothing, so.
Now here it says, some places it says what you just said. Here he's not saying that. He's saying the opposite here.
I know.
Here he's bringing up Malchus as a Yesh.
Right.
So why was that not supposed?
When he says in Tanya, the kedusha means that something is a keli for elikus. If something has identity and substance of its own, it limits it doesn't allow life to enter. It doesn't allow, like he says, the keli teir so if you have to have bittul and complete bittul and.
So what was
You can't
that?
have a closed mind.
David was Malchus. Malchus, thinking that he was Malchus, the level of Malchus. He didn't have. He was so. But there's a Yeshem Mitzias in the state of Malchus. Not that he was arrogant.
What is the bar nafla bringing out?
That's why he had no life, because he's a Yesh.
Because he is a yesh.
Yeah, because Yeshem Mitzias, so he has no life.
He was a born king. He almost didn't survive
Yeah.
because of that.
No, 1 second, but there's an end. V'rak Adam Arishan Nasan Lo Ayin Shnin. Only Adam gave him 70 years. Sometimes it says that different people gave. This one gave 37. There's a whole thing that he gave. Adam Arishan gave 70. Then there's another place that says others. And if you look in Derech Mitzvah Minei Melech, he talks about this detail. The Adam Arishan ubchinis chachmei la. Adam Arishan is the higher wisdom. And that chachma being that it's a state of lack of substance, how do you calculate in Baruch? That's a container for the divine energy. Canal. Okay, we said above. Valkain. Okay, stop.
So he
gave David of the bittul of Chachmei La that allows for the Chachmei Tata to survive. Without it, it's not a keli for Ein Sof. That's what he's saying. This doesn't mean, remember, we're talking here David as a baby, as a newborn. So we're not talking about he was a yesh in any. We're not talking about yesh as in negative way. It means mitzias in Atzilus. Malchus Atzilus mitzias. Malchus Lesla Magamoklun has nothing of its own, right? And Malchus Atzilus, it doesn't say that here. Here's the opposite. Malchus has to have yesh and mitzias. Why? Because Malchus is going to create. Chochmah is the source. Chochmah is still connected to the mouth of the well. So it starts to flow. But Chochmah doesn't create anything. Chochmah gives the bittul. Then it goes through Bina, all the levels. In Malchus, it's taking on, Malchus has to be a king that's going to lead the next world. So he has to have an element of Mitzias. But there's a downside. The downside is that on its own, if it's a Yesha Mitzias, it doesn't have Chai. So now, Chochmah law is Mamshich into Chochmah Tata, bittul, that gives it both things that Malchus can do its role now. On one hand, it has the bittul. On the other hand, it can now lead. Remember, Chachma Allah couldn't lead. It's too much bittul. You need a king has to have a sense of aura. He needs aura. He needs majesty. He needs presence. He needs a. That's what he needs. He can't just be a butteldika entity. Basically, means Malchus Atzilus needs to be a Metzias in order to give to Biyah. But the truth is, Malchus is like Bar Nafla. It's less than Magam Klum. It has nothing of its own. Because being a Yesh Metzias, it cannot have anything of its own. So who gives it Chayas then? Who gives it substance? Not substance. Not who gives it life? Look, it's simple. It's a simple thing. The more keli, the less air. Malchus is more kelim because it has to create existence.
So David by himself would have basically been.
He would have not been born, or he would have died early.
Because he got from other religions,
which was the plan in the first place. So obviously, it's not In other words, so Malchus has to receive from the levels before in order to be able to lead. Actually, it would be no good if Malchus had its own chayas. Then you'd have Yesh having its own chayas, not having to be dependent on the bittul to Chachmeilah. Then it would just be on its own. So you want it to have that. It's back to the same thing with Yesh and Er. Remember we say the power of Atzmus is in there with Tachtenim. But Tachtenim can't run the show. Tachtenim is substance. It needs direction. It would be like you're saying the body is higher than your soul. So we're going to follow the body? The body can't, no. The soul has to tell the body now where to go.
Wow.
So it's that constant element.
It was actually Malchus Sheba Malchus. He had to get from anything. Yeah. He had nothing.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So it's a constant paradox. The purpose is there, and you need the Yeshem Mitzvahs, you need identity. But if it doesn't have the connection to the bittul or the Eira Bligvul, as he put it, so Malchus is like the ultimate Gvul. Chachmei Law is the Bligvul in this case. Remember, he said in the Mamutza itself. The general Mamutza is that Atzilus has in it the Reshim, has in it the impression, and has in it the same fabric. It's coming, like he said, similar to Ein Sof, Bligvul. On the other hand, it's Gvul, so it has a similarity because it's going to be the root of Biyah and so on. Now he's saying in Atzilus itself, in the 10 spheres itself, this is the distinction between Chachmei Law and Chachmei Tata. Chachmei Law introduces the bittul, Chachmei Tata introduces the Metzias, the substance. And you need both, that's the key. It works. And that's why these are the two Chachmei Lachem, the higher Chachmei Law, Chachmei, the two levels within the interface. The Chachmei Law is Hamadrega Shemitzadai and Sefer Baruch Hu. The higher wisdom, that's the Madrega, that's representing the side of the infinite. God bless be Baruch Hu, bless be. The Chachmei Tata Hamadrega Shemitzadai Nevraim. And Chachmei Tata represents is the level from the perspective. It's like the Toyin representing the creatures. So you have. So now you have within Atzilus a very eloquent structure. Chachmei Law, Chachmei Tata. So think of it like the Mamutz in general is between here and here, and then in this interface itself, you have a part that is bringing in this energy, and there's a part that's giving out that energy, and that's where they meet.
Yeah. Yeah, what's between the two of them?
So it's like this. We have to eat sholent. I don't know about sholent. You have to eat food on Shabbos, but you don't have to indulge in it. You understand? So you have to be there. You have to be in the world of containers and feel the taste. But you have to always remember you're coming from a higher place. The problem is if the kalim become too much kalim, or now you could say, okay, I don't want to eat altogether. No, that's not either. You have to be there, but remain above. That's the key. Balance. Some people are too much into the kalim, some people too much into the air. You need the balance. It's the hardest part. The Maraglim wanted to stay in the midbar. They wanted air. They're not interested in kalim. They said, they actually say that Balabais is EF Shalahetzi Kalev, that once the God created the Kalim, we can't extract him from there. So we don't want to go there. They thought of going into the material world would trap us and we wouldn't be able to get out. Okay. So what do we got here? Let's see. Let me see if we continue here. Yeah, we'll go a few more lines. Well, but Prati is This is also, these are very fundamental chapters. And Bepratius, and specifically Beis HaMadreish B'Mutza, the two levels of this interface, same B'chinas Eres V'Kelim, that's the Spheres. That's the energies and the containers of the 10 Spheres. Ayim Mashnas Bar Leil Peideches. Look at what we discussed earlier, chapter 8. So now he's saying in general it's the energies and the containers. Because the air is still in a state of shapelessness. Like we discussed earlier, that the general energy, even though it's an energy that's measured and parameters, the gam and also in their root and source, there are also 10 spheres in the emanator. And they're in a state of, it's still the nigun like this, they're still in a state of shapelessness and literal unity. And also the kav that's after the tzimtzum, shakav osim in the kudus protim. The kav is made up of specific dots, points. That's the, I'm sorry, the nigun goes like this. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's the way it goes. So even though air on it is midav gvul, and even in its root it's that way, and there it's complete pshitus. And also in the kav, it's made up of nekudis, so you could say there is gvul. Air at the end of the day is still blima, without substance. Oh, I'm sorry, and in the kav, it's still blima, even though there's nekudis, there's points. To the extent, the way the energy comes into Atzilus, that the 10 spheres of the energies, as we've learned earlier, are relative to the containers, they're shapeless. They're amorphous. Relative to the 10 spheres of the Kelim. So we see from this that the energy in general is in a state of shapelessness still. As it is coming from the Ein Sof, the infinite divine light from the emanator. This is all still the air. And specifically because it has within it, from the infinite love of divine light, because of this, because of this, it's similar to the source of light, the luminary, of the level of the infinite light. On the other hand, what's the other side of the Mutza? Oh, he goes like this. And the primary place where Mitzias of Esespheres, we say substance of Chachma, Bin, and so on, Chachma v'Chesed, the levels of Chachma and Chesed, hu ba'kelim dafka, are specifically in the kelim, in the containers. The gamma kelim the Esespheres, and also the containers of the 10 spheres, Hadehem Elikus Mamish, are literally divine. However, this is the power of Gvul, not the Eir HaGvul. This is the power of Gvul of Ein Sof, like he writes in Avedis HaKedesh that we discussed and mentioned last chapter. That's why they're containers to the energy, which manifests in them because they're divine.
But they're still very much Gvul.
Their identity. Yeah. That's the key. Remember, I said, when God creates a stone, just an example, Kalim are not a stone, but it's an example. The stone is God's stone. He created the stone. Not you and I, nobody created it. But the stone has nothing from its own end, from its end, it's not any consciousness of the divine. You can't call it an extension of divine energy. You can create a creation of divine energy. Not because from God's perspective, it's all, like we learned earlier, it's all part of one unity. Eir, on the other hand, its personality is not about a stone. Even if it's energizing it. Its personality is God's expression. It's God's energy. It's divine energy to go into the stone, yes. But relative to the stone, it's complete revelation. It's a consciousness So the Kalim, now go back, the Kalim are Kayach HaGvul, and they're created by God's power to create Gvul. That's why they're containers to the air. But the air is divine energy, it's divine revelation, it's a divine consciousness. It carries within it an awareness of its source. So fundamentally, the air is really like the sunlight. Sunlight, even if it warms, it's going down to earth, God wants it to bring warmth to this earth and light. And not only that, the sun makes things grow. But how does the sun interact with the things that are growing? It doesn't interact with them like in a personal way. The sun shines on garbage and on the garden, and it makes the flowers grow. Right? It's pshittus. It's not a perfect example, you'll see in a while, because that's not the opinion in Ayin Beis that he's going for. But I'm just want to use that as an example. Then there's the flower. The flower is also God's. Kayach HaGvul. God created a keli. But the energy is primarily expressing the divine energy in this existence. The only distinction I make with sunlight is that sunlight is not tailored. The light does not have in its particles. It doesn't have in it chesed and chokhmah. Here it does have. So that's the only qualification. But there's, on the same time, even though there's the Eir HaChesed going to the Klei HaChesed, into the flower of Chesed, but it's not the flower. The flower is the substance. If you only had Eir HaChesed, it would remain a hovering energy. The Keli gives it the identity and substance of existence. The Eir gives it life. And the Eir is tailored to it. So the Eir has Eir HaChesed, but relative to the container, think of it this way. If God gave us a neshama, but we didn't have parents who gave us our bodies, in other words, fingers, flesh, skeleton, and so on. So you have a neshama. The neshama is ready to be fit into the container, but you don't have the container. So the three partners are father and mother give us body. The Gemara says which part which, the bones, the blood, the teeth, and so on. And then there is God puts a soul in, and they come together. So the kelim is the body. The soul is the energy. But in this case, the soul is commensurate. It has within it the spheres. But compared to the body, even the energy that goes into your eye, that's giving you vision right now, can you compare the power of vision to the physical eye? No. Obviously, you need both. The power of vision remains still a more or less a soul faculty. It's a part of your spirit. It doesn't have tangible relation. But it fits into the container. The container is created by the divine. That's why it's a keli for the air. But that's called Metzias Davar. And these are the two levels in the Mamutza. So now, we said Atzilus in general is a Mamutza. Now we spoke Chach Melach. Now it's the tense Eris and Kelim. Sha'er shu b'chinas pshitus harizeh kamoi mitzad atzmei erin sof habligvul. The air that's in a state of amorphousness, it is on its own, like in a state of bligvul. Remember, it's not real gvul, it's eir hagvul. But comparatively speaking, it's representing the divine element that is beyond structure. And the containers which are mamish gvul, which are identity, they are be'erech, proportionate to the creations. And even though the Gvul of Nevraim is asking the question now, aren't they infinitely destined compared to the Gvul of Atzilus? Fine. What you've established now, it's very nice that the Gvul of Atzilus has something in common with the Bli Gvul of Atzilus. So the Eir and Keli fit. But now what does that do for us? The Gvul of Biyah is not the Gvul of Atzilus. Gvul of Atzilus is a divine creation. This goes back to what I said a little earlier. Nevertheless, being that now we do have the Kalim of Atzilus do have now parameters. Yes, they're divine parameters. They're not yesh as in Biyah. But now there's a commonality. There's a chesed in Bria. There's a chesed in Atzilus. Yes, a shalei berach. The chesed in our world here cannot be compared to the chesed in Atzilus. But you cannot say, as I said before, that it's completely as if it doesn't exist. They both have one word called chesed. When you give tzedakah to someone, Hashem calls it tzedakah. It may be compared to his tzedakah. It may completely be different. But you cannot say that doesn't have one common word. When he says Mahu Chanun, just as he is compassionate, we're compassionate. So someone say, wait a second, but it's infinite distance. No, but we have one thing in common. You're doing something that God does. You're doing like one drop. You're doing whatever you want to call it, infinitely distant. But you cannot, as I said with the numbers, not call it a number. You could say it's nothing compared to God's chesed. But to say that your chesed has no value, you could say that legabe bligvul, but you can't say that legabe chesed of Atzilus or chesed of the 10 hidden spheres. Legabe bligvul, because bligvul never manifested in a chesed. There's no chesed. Bligvul is infinite possibilities. Chesed wasn't even chosen. So what are we talking about? There's nothing in common. It's like I said with the Mittler Rebbe. He lives in his world. There's nothing in common with us. Once there's a divine desire for the 10 hidden spheres, Shir Atzmei, and it has within it the Reshim, the impression, and it manifests in Atzilus and the Oyer, and that manifests in the Keli, then we have here something in common with the Keli, creates a commonality with the lower worlds. So we think about Avram's chesed. Avram's chesed is chesed of Atzilus. But yet we say constantly we should follow the midas of Avram. Brishe shel Avram Avinu, we say. Have a mitamidav shel Aaron. You say, well, I can't never reach the level of Avram. Doesn't matter. He's chesed of Atzilus, you're chesed of Bria. Your chesed evolved from his chesed. So it's infinitely distant, but it evolved from there. We are created in the divine image. Our faculties, it says in Tanya, nishtalshlu, evolved from the 10 spheres. Doesn't matter how small you are, how inferior you are, depends on how you think about yourself. Your existence is a divine image. Doesn't imagine that? No matter what. You can't do anything about it. You can conceal it. It can be distorted, but it can't go away.
But it seems like it never should apply to the whole world, even Iraq. I mean.
Yeah. I'm just applying it. It's true. Iraq is different because Iraq is not created b'tselem Elokim, as I said.
Yeah, but this divine image we were just talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the divine image. I'm talking about is actually more the Kalim.
The whole world.
I was talking about Chesed. I'm talking about the faculties, really. Now, everything evolves from the 10 spheres. That's a given. The Saram Amoris and so on. But it's a human being. This is really about the human being more than anything, because it's the human that reveals the divine in the stone. On its own, it's just going to sit there. So, never being gvul, the kelim do confine the energy. Like we learned earlier, that he and his containers are one. You. So in order to create, that's through the containers. I think we should stop here, because the parentheses is going now into a whole question on this, and then we'll continue. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here. Let me say one thing before we stop. So we're up to here that he's basically making the case that the mamutza, the interface is Eris and Kalim, and the Kalim are Gvul, so they're Be'erech HaNivraim. And even though the Gvul and Nivraim is completely infinitely distant, still once it's become Gvul in the Kalim of Atzilus, in the containers, it limits it, and through that it creates. So the Kalim are actually the tools, the instruments through which God creates the Gvul of the lower world. So they do have something in common. Because if you take away the Kalim, the creation won't happen. So that's what he says in the Geras HaKodesh. We learned this, that the containers are the instruments, as opposed to the vision within the instrument, vision that's driving the instruments, which is the energies. Okay, we'll stop here, and then we'll continue from the parentheses. So we did the first half of chapter 161, bottom of page 320, through the top of 322.